The rain drummed against my truck windshield as I sat in the parking lot of Mira's office building, watching the amber glow from the third floor where she claimed to be working late again. Mason Reddan, they called me. 38 years old, contractor by trade, fool by marriage. The digital clock on my dashboard read 9:47 p.m., and my wife's Honda was still parked in her usual spot. 3 weeks of late reviews and urgent HR meetings had stretched my patience thin as fishing line. Mira worked hard, always had, but something felt different this time. The credit card statements showed charges at restaurants I'd never been to, lingerie purchases that never made it home, and a coldness in her green eyes that hadn't been there during our 7 years of marriage. I grabbed my old GoPro from the glove compartment, a relic from my failed attempt at starting a YouTube channel about home renovation. The security guard knew me from the Christmas parties, so getting past the lobby wouldn't be a problem. My work boots echoed in the empty hallway as I made my way to the elevator. The third floor was dark except for the corner office where Derek Halsey, the regional director, worked. Light spilled from beneath Mira's door down the hall. I pressed record on the camera and approached quietly, my heart hammering against my ribs like a carpenter's nail gun. Through the gap in the doorway, I saw them. Mira leaned against her desk, her dark hair falling across her shoulders, while Derek stood close enough to count her freckles. His hand rested on her waist, and she was laughing at something he'd whispered. The intimacy between them was unmistakable. This wasn't a late review or an urgent meeting. I pushed the door open wider, making sure the camera captured everything. Derek looked up first, his face shifting from surprise to that trademark smirk that made him look like he'd just won a poker hand with a pair of twos. Well, well, Derek said, straightening his tie. Mason, isn't it? You shouldn't be here after hours. Mira's face went pale, but she didn't move away from him. Mason, this isn't what it looks like. Really? I kept the camera steady, watching the timestamp tick forward. Because it looks like my wife is having a cozy chat with her boss at 10 o'clock at night. Derek's smirk widened. Listen, buddy, I don't know what you think you're doing with that camera, but you can't do anything to me. I run this department. I have lawyers. I have connections you can't imagine. I checked the camera display, confirming the recording was still active, then looked back at Derek with my own smile. No, I can't do anything to you, but your wife has already seen this video. Their faces twisted instantly. Derek's smirk vanished like smoke, and Mira's mouth opened in a perfect circle of shock. I hadn't sent anything to Jolene Halsey yet, but the threat landed exactly where I'd aimed it. You're lying, Derek said, but his voice cracked like a teenager's. I stopped recording and slipped the camera into my jacket pocket. Am I? Jolene's email address is on your charity foundation's website. Nice photos from last year's gala, by the way. You two look so happy together. Mira finally found her voice. Mason, please. We can talk about this at home. No, we can't. I turned toward the door. We're way past talking, Mira. Way past. I walked out without another word, leaving them standing in that office like mannequins in a store window. The elevator ride down felt like the longest minute of my life, but by the time I reached my truck, I knew exactly what I needed to do. Back home in our suburban kitchen, I connected the camera to my laptop and watched the footage 3 times. The timestamp, the audio, the body language, everything was crystal clear. I exported the video file and checked the metadata, making sure the date and timestamps were intact. Next, I logged into Mira's work email. She'd never changed her password from our anniversary date and exported her calendar, showing the recurring late review appointments that coincidentally matched Derek's schedule. I pulled up the building's badge access system through the employee portal and downloaded the entry logs for both of them. The credit card statements were already printed and organized in a folder. Dinner at Romano's, the hotel bar at the Marriott, charges at Victoria's Secret that never resulted in anything I'd seen. I photographed everything and compiled it into a single PDF file. At 11:30 p.m., I sent the entire package to my lawyer, Jim Crawford, with a note requesting he review everything for divorce proceedings. Then I opened a new email and looked up the contact information for the Halsey Foundation, Derek's pet charity project. Jolene Halsey's email address was listed right there under Board of Directors. I attached the video file and the credit card statements, typed a brief message explaining that she might want to review her husband's recent business activities, and hit send. The house felt different when Mira came home 20 minutes later. She tried to act normal, hanging up her coat and asking about my day, but her hands shook as she poured herself a glass of wine. How was the late review? I asked, not looking up from my laptop. Fine, productive. She sat down across from me at the kitchen table. Mason, about tonight, I've already sent the video to Jim Crawford, I said, and to Jolene Halsey, along with your credit card statements and the badge access logs. Mira's wine glass hit the table harder than she'd intended. You can't just... Actually, I can. And I did. I closed the laptop and looked at her directly. 7 years, Mira. 7 years of marriage, and this is how you want to end it? It's not what you think. Derek and I were not... Don't. I held up my hand. Don't insult my intelligence. I've got everything documented. The late meetings, the credit card charges, the hotel visits. You want to throw away our marriage for Derek Halsey? Fine. But you're going to own it. She started crying then, but the tears felt calculated, like everything else about her lately. Mason, please. We can work through this. I stood up from the table. No, we can't. The smirk on Derek's face tonight? That told me everything I needed to know about how much respect either of you have for me. But that smirk is about to cost both of you more than you bargained for. I went upstairs to our bedroom and started packing a bag. Mira followed, pleading and promising, but I'd already made my decision. Some lines, once crossed, can't be uncrossed. By morning, I'd be staying at my cousin Casey's place across town, and the real work would begin. Casey's apartment smelled like coffee and motor oil, which suited me fine. My cousin had always been the family's wild card, 5 years younger than me, twice as clever, and completely uninterested in playing by anyone else's rules. When I showed up at his door at 6 a.m. with a duffel bag and a story, he just poured me a cup of coffee and listened. So let me get this straight, Casey said, leaning against his kitchen counter. Your wife's been playing house with her boss, and when you caught them, the guy basically told you to go pound sand? That's about the size of it. I sipped the coffee, which was strong enough to wake the deceased. I've got everything documented. Video, financial records, access logs. Jim Crawford thinks I can get a clean divorce with minimal asset loss. But that's not enough for you, is it? I looked at my cousin, seeing the familiar glint in his dark eyes that had gotten us both into trouble when we were kids. Derek Halsey thinks he's untouchable, thinks his money and connections make him bulletproof. I want to prove him wrong. Casey grinned. Now you're talking my language. What's the plan? Before I could answer, my phone buzzed with a text from Jim Crawford. Mira filed harassment complaint this morning. Claims you threatened her and Derek. Need to see you ASAP. Son of a... I caught myself. She's trying to get ahead of the story. Smart move, Casey said, reading over my shoulder. But you've got the evidence, right? The real stuff? Everything. I grabbed my laptop bag. I need to get to Jim's office before Mira's lies take root. An hour later, I sat in Jim Crawford's law office, watching him review the video footage and supporting documents. Jim was a thin, methodical man who'd handled my business contracts for years. He had the kind of mind that could spot a loophole from 3 counties away. This is solid work, Mason, Jim said, adjusting his glasses. The metadata on the video file proves it wasn't edited, and the access logs support your timeline, but Mira's complaint complicates things. What's she claiming? That you've been stalking her at work, making threats, and that last night you forced your way into her office to intimidate her and Derek. Jim pulled out a printed form. She's requesting a restraining order. I laughed, but it came out bitter. Forced my way in? I walked through an unlocked door into a public office building, and the only threats made were from Derek to me. I believe you, but we need to be proactive. I'm going to submit your evidence package to their HR department today, along with a formal complaint about Derek's conduct. The company has a zero-tolerance policy for supervisor relationships with subordinates. Will that be enough? Jim smiled for the first time since I'd arrived. Mason, you've just handed me enough ammunition to end Derek Halsey's career. The badge logs show he's been accessing the building after hours with Mira for weeks. The company's own consent policy requires disclosure of any romantic relationships between supervisors and employees. They never filed the paperwork. By noon, I was back at Casey's apartment, feeling like I'd regained some control. My phone had been buzzing with calls from Mira, but I let them all go to voicemail. Whatever she had to say, she could say it through lawyers. Casey was working on his motorcycle in the parking lot when I found him. How'd it go with the lawyer? Better than expected. Jim thinks we can turn Mira's complaint against her. The company has policies about supervisor relationships that Derek violated. Good. But what about the personal side? You said this Derek guy thinks he's bulletproof. I watched Casey tighten a bolt on his bike's engine. What are you thinking? I'm thinking maybe it's time Derek learned that money doesn't protect you from everything. Casey wiped his hands on a rag. You know what kind of car he drives? BMW. Black. License plate says Halsey 1. Of course it does. Casey shook his head. Guys like that, their cars are like extensions of their egos. Mess with the car, you mess with the man. I'm not looking to commit vandalism, Casey. Who said anything about vandalism? I'm talking about creative expression. He grinned. You still got that bar of soap from your construction supplies? That evening, we found Derek's BMW parked outside Romano's restaurant, the same place he'd taken Mira according to the credit card statements. Casey had brought a bar of soap and a can of washable spray chalk he'd borrowed from his nephew's sidewalk art kit. "Keep watch," Casey whispered as he approached the car. I stood at the corner of the parking lot, heart pounding like a teenager pulling a prank. Casey worked quickly, using the soap to write "cheater" across the windshield in large, impossible-to-miss letters. Then he used the spray chalk to decorate the driver's side door with a message that read, "Ask me about my affairs." The whole operation took less than 3 minutes. By the time Derek and Mira emerged from the restaurant, we were long gone, watching from Casey's motorcycle parked across the street. Derek's reaction was everything I'd hoped for. He stood beside his defaced BMW, face red with rage, while Mira looked around nervously. Other restaurant patrons were pointing and whispering. Someone even took a photo with their phone. "Beautiful," Casey said. "Absolutely beautiful." My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "This isn't over, Reddan." I showed the message to Casey, who just laughed. "Looks like Derek's feeling chatty. Too bad he doesn't know what's coming next." "What's coming next?" "Phase 2. But first, we need to make a stop at Mulligan's Bar. I've got a friend there who loves a good story." Mulligan's was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone else's business, and Linda Morrison was the unofficial town historian. She'd been bartending there for 15 years, and her memory for gossip was legendary. When we walked in, she was polishing glasses and chatting with a regular about the weather. "Casey Reddan," she called out. "Haven't seen you in a while. And Mason, how's married life treating you?" Casey and I exchanged glances. "That's actually why we're here, Linda. Mason's got a story you might find interesting." For the next hour, I told Linda everything. The late meetings, the credit card charges, catching them in the office, Derek's smirk, and the soap incident. Linda listened with the intensity of a prosecutor building a case. "Derek Halsey," she said when I finished. "I always knew that man was trouble. Too smooth, you know. And his wife, Jolene, she's been coming in here lately drinking alone. Says Derek's been working late a lot." "Really?" "Honey, in a town this size, everybody's business is everybody's business. And Derek's been playing this game for years. Your wife's not the first, just the latest." That information hit me like a sledgehammer. There were others? At least 2 that I know of, maybe more. But he's always been careful, and the women never talked. Until now. Linda leaned across the bar. "You want my advice? Make some noise. Guys like Derek count on people staying quiet. Once the whole town knows what he's been up to, his little kingdom starts to crumble." We left Mulligan's with a plan. Linda promised to spread the word about Derek's extracurricular activities, and Casey had some ideas about making Derek's life more complicated. But as we walked to his motorcycle, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were just getting started. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Mira. "We need to talk. Meet me at the house tomorrow at 7 p.m. I showed the message to Casey. "What do you think?" "I think your wife is getting desperate, and desperate people make mistakes. Should I go?" "Absolutely, but not alone and not without insurance." Casey started his bike. Time to see just how far Mira's willing to go to save herself. The next evening, I arrived at what used to be our house to find Mira waiting in the kitchen with 2 cups of coffee and an expression I couldn't read. She'd always been good at controlling her face. It was part of what made her effective in HR. But tonight I could see cracks in the facade. "Thank you for coming," she said, gesturing to the chair across from her. I remained standing. "You've got 5 minutes, Mira. Say what you need to say." "The harassment complaint. I can withdraw it. We can work this out between us, without lawyers, without making everything public." She wrapped her hands around her coffee cup. "Derek means nothing to me. It was just a mistake, a moment of weakness." "A moment of weakness that lasted 3 months?" Her composure slipped slightly. "How did you—" "Never mind. The point is, it's over. Done. We can move past this." I pulled out my phone and set it on the table between us, making sure she could see the recording app was active. "Tell me about the other women." Mira's face went white. "What other women?" "Linda Morrison has a good memory for stories, Mira. Turns out Derek's been playing this game for years. Makes me wonder how long you've known about his reputation." "I don't know what you're talking about." "Really? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you knew exactly what you were getting into with Derek, which makes this less about a moment of weakness and more about a calculated decision." Mira stood up abruptly, knocking over her coffee cup. The ceramic clattered against the table, dark liquid spreading across the wood and dripping onto the floor, but she didn't seem to notice. Her face was flushed, eyes bright and unfocused. "You're recording this conversation after everything we've been through?" Everything we've been through? I stopped the recording and pocketed my phone. The motion was deliberate, final. Mira, you threw away 7 years of marriage for a guy who's probably already moved on to his next target. And now you want to play the victim? I made a mistake. Her voice wavered, hands lifting as if she could physically stop the words already in motion. No, you made a choice. Multiple choices. The late meetings, the credit card charges, the lies. Every single day for 3 months, you chose Derek over our marriage. Each example landed cleanly, not shouted, not exaggerated, just stated, one after another, impossible to argue with. I headed toward the door, my hand already on the handle, the weight of the room pressing in on my back. But Mira's voice stopped me. Mason, please. I know you're angry, and you have every right to be, but destroying Derek won't bring us back together. There was a note of pleading now, mixed with something like fear. I turned around. Who said anything about bringing us back together? This isn't about reconciliation, Mira. This is about consequences. I let the words sit there between us before turning back to the door. As I drove away from the house, my phone rang. Casey's name appeared on the display. How'd it go with the wife? He asked, his tone careful but curious. About like you'd expect. She wants to withdraw the harassment complaint and pretend this never happened. The streetlights slid past in a steady rhythm as I spoke. And Derek? Any word from Prince Charming? Not yet, but I have a feeling that's about to change. I pulled into a gas station and parked under the bright lights, the engine ticking softly as it cooled. Linda was right about him having a pattern. Mira knew what she was getting into. Makes sense. Guys like Derek don't hide their nature very well. Speaking of which, I've got some intel you might find interesting. I'm listening. Derek's been bragging about his conquests at the country club. Apparently he likes to share details about his conquests with his golf buddies. Real classy guy. How do you know this? My buddy Jake works maintenance there. He hears everything. Says Derek was talking about breaking in the new HR girl just last week. The words hit me like a physical blow. The casual cruelty of it, the reduction of my wife to just another conquest, made my hands clench around the steering wheel, knuckles whitening before I realized it. Mason, you still there? Yeah, I'm here. I took a deep breath, forcing it slow and steady. Casey, I think it's time Derek and I had a private conversation. What kind of conversation? The kind where he learns that some people don't stay quiet. 2 hours later, Casey and I were parked outside the construction site where my crew was building a new office complex. The half-finished building was dark and empty, surrounded by equipment and materials. It was the perfect place for a conversation without interruptions. Casey had made a phone call to Derek, claiming to be a reporter interested in doing a story about the Halsey Foundation. He'd suggested they meet at the construction site to discuss Derek's charitable work away from the office. Derek had agreed, probably thinking it was an opportunity for positive publicity. At 9:30, Derek's BMW pulled into the gravel parking area. He stepped out wearing an expensive suit and a confused expression, clearly not expecting to find the site deserted. Mr. Halsey, Casey called out from the shadows near the building entrance. Derek approached cautiously. Are you the reporter? This seems like an odd place for an interview. That's when I stepped out from behind a concrete mixer, and Derek's confusion turned to alarm. Hello, Derek. Nice night for a chat, don't you think? Derek backed toward his car. What is this? Some kind of setup? Relax. We just want to talk. I gestured toward the building entrance. Privately. I'm not going anywhere with you people. This is harassment. Casey moved to block Derek's path to his car. Harassment? That's interesting. Coming from you. Tell me, Derek, how many employees have you broken in over the years? Derek's face went pale in the security lighting. I don't know what you're talking about. Sure you do. I walked closer, keeping my voice calm and level. See, the thing about small towns is that people talk. And when they talk, stories get around. Stories about patterns of behavior. You can't prove anything. Actually, we can. Video evidence, financial records, witness statements. But that's not why we're here. I stopped just outside Derek's personal space. We're here because you made a mistake. What mistake? You smirked. I let that sink in for a moment. When I walked into that office and caught you with my wife, you looked at me like I was nothing, like I was some blue-collar nobody who couldn't touch you. Derek tried to move around me, but I stepped sideways, blocking his path. The thing is, Derek, I've been underestimated my whole life. By teachers, by bosses, by people who think a contractor can't be as smart as a guy in a suit. Usually I don't mind. But when someone disrespects my marriage and then smirks about it, that's when I take it personally. What do you want? I want you to understand something. Your money, your connections, your position, none of that protects you from the consequences of your choices. You thought you could take my wife and walk away clean. You were wrong." Derek's voice cracked slightly. "Look, Mason, I never meant for things to go this far. Mira and it just happened." "Nothing just happens, Derek. You made a choice to pursue a married woman. You made a choice to violate your company's policies. You made a choice to treat her like another conquest to brag about at the country club." Derek's eyes widened. "How did you—" "Like I said, people talk, and now everyone's going to know exactly what kind of man you really are." I stepped back, giving Derek room to breathe. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to resign from your position, you're going to stay away from my wife, and you're going to live with the fact that everyone in this town knows what you did." "And if I don't?" Casey spoke up from behind Derek. "Then we release everything, the video, the financial records, the witness statements about your other affairs, your wife, your board of directors, your golf buddies. Everyone gets to see the real Derek Halsey." Derek looked between us, his earlier confidence completely gone. "This is blackmail." "No," I said. "This is justice. Blackmail would be if we wanted money or favors. We just want you to face the consequences of your choices." Derek walked back to his car without another word. As he drove away, Casey clapped me on the shoulder. "Think he got the message?" "Oh, he got it. But guys like Derek don't give up easy. He'll try to fight back." "Let him try. We've got everything documented, and now we've got him scared. Scared people make mistakes." My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "You have no idea who you're messing with." I showed it to Casey, who just laughed. "Looks like Derek's feeling chatty again. Too bad he doesn't realize he's already lost." As we drove away from the construction site, I couldn't shake the feeling that Derek was right about one thing. This wasn't over. But for the first time since I'd caught them together, I felt like I was the one in control. The hunter had become the hunted, and Derek Halsey was about to learn that some prey fights back. The next morning brought news that changed everything. Jim Crawford called me at Casey's apartment with an update that made my coffee taste like victory. "Derek Halsey has been suspended pending a full investigation," Jim said. "Apparently your evidence package was very compelling. The company's board is taking this seriously." "What about Mira?" "She's been transferred to a different department while they sort things out. No suspension yet, but her credibility is shot. The harassment complaint has been quietly withdrawn." I sat down heavily on Casey's couch. "So it's working." "Better than working. I just got off the phone with Jolene Halsey's attorney. She's filing for divorce and requesting a full audit of Derek's finances. Turns out your video was just the tip of the iceberg." "What do you mean?" "Derek's been using company funds for his extracurricular activities. The hotel charges, the restaurant bills, even some of the gifts he bought for his various companions. All billed to the company credit card as business expenses." Casey looked up from his breakfast. "So he's not just a cheater, he's a thief?" "Looks that way," Jim continued. "Jolene's attorney found evidence of at least $50,000 in questionable expenses over the past 2 years. The board is not happy." After I hung up, Casey and I sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes. The morning sun streamed through his apartment windows, and for the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe properly. "So what's next?" Casey asked. "I guess we wait and see how Derek responds. Guys like him don't go down without a fight." I didn't have to wait long. That afternoon, while I was picking up supplies for a job, I found Derek waiting by my truck in the parking lot of the hardware store. He looked like he'd aged 10 years overnight. His usually perfect hair was disheveled, his expensive suit wrinkled, and his eyes had the hollow look of a man watching his world collapse. "We need to talk," Derek said as I approached. "I don't think we have anything to discuss." I unlocked my truck and started loading supplies. "You've destroyed my career, my marriage, everything I've worked for. Are you satisfied?" I turned to face him. "Derek, I didn't destroy anything. I just documented what you were already doing. You manipulated the situation. You set me up. I caught you having an affair with my wife. Everything that happened after that was your choice." Derek stepped closer, and I could smell alcohol on his breath. "You think you're so smart, don't you? Blue-collar hero takes down the corrupt executive, but you have no idea what you've unleashed." "Is that a threat?" "It's a promise. You want to play hardball? Fine. But I've got resources you can't imagine. Lawyers, private investigators, connections in places you've never heard of." I finished loading my truck and closed the tailgate. "Derek, let me explain something to you. I'm a contractor. I work with my hands, I solve problems, and I finish what I start. You're a middle manager who got caught cheating on his wife with an employee. Which one of us do you think people are going to respect? Derek's face flushed red. This isn't over. Yes, it is. You just don't know it yet. That evening, I met Linda Morrison at Mulligan's bar to hear the latest town gossip. The place was busier than usual, filled with the kind of excited chatter that comes when scandal hits a small community. Mason, Linda called out when I walked in. You're the man of the hour. Everyone's talking about Derek Halsey. I took a seat at the bar. What are they saying? That it's about time someone stood up to him. You know Mrs. Patterson, the librarian? Her daughter worked for Derek's company 2 years ago. Quit suddenly, wouldn't say why. Now everyone's putting two and two together. How's Jolene handling it? Linda poured me a beer. Better than you'd expect. She was in here yesterday, actually. Said she'd been suspicious for months, but never had proof. Your video gave her the courage to hire a private investigator. And what did the investigator find? Oh, honey, Derek's been a busy boy. Affairs, financial irregularities, even some questionable charity donations that somehow ended up funding his lifestyle. Jolene's attorney is having a field day. As Linda spoke, I noticed Allie Brennan, Mira's best friend and co-worker, sitting alone at a corner table. She looked miserable, staring into a glass of wine like it held the answers to life's problems. Excuse me for a minute, I told Linda, and walked over to Allie's table. The bar was dim and crowded, voices blending into a low, constant murmur as I threaded my way between stools and half-empty glasses. Mind if I sit? Allie looked up with red-rimmed eyes, mascara faintly smudged beneath them. Her shoulders were tense, hunched inward. I suppose you're here to gloat. Actually, I'm here to listen. You look like you need to talk to someone. I kept my voice low, neutral, and waited. Allie laughed bitterly, the sound sharp and humorless. Talk? About what? About how my best friend threw away her marriage for a man who's been bragging about their affair to anyone who'll listen? About how I've been covering for her lies for months? She gestured vaguely with her glass, wine sloshing near the rim. You knew? Of course I knew. Mira told me everything. Her jaw tightened as she said the name. Made me promise to keep her secret. Said it was true love. Said Derek was going to leave his wife. Allie took a long sip of wine, draining the glass as if she wanted the burn more than the taste. I should have told you. I should have warned you what was happening. Why didn't you? Because she's my friend. Or was my friend. I don't even know anymore. Allie pulled out her phone with an unsteady hand and turned the screen toward me. Look at this. The message was from Mira. Stay away from Mason. Don't talk to anyone about Derek and me. I mean it, Allie. She's trying to control the narrative, I said quietly, noting the sharpness of the language, the threat beneath it. Too late for that. The whole office knows what happened. Derek's suspension, the investigation, Jolene's divorce filing, it's all anyone talks about. Allie put her phone away and stared into the empty space in front of her. Mira keeps insisting it was true love, but Derek won't even return her calls now. She's completely delusional. What about you? Are you okay? Allie looked genuinely surprised by the question, as if it hadn't occurred to her that her own state mattered. Me? I'm the idiot who helped cover up an affair that destroyed 2 marriages. I'm far from okay. You didn't destroy anything, Allie. Derek and Mira made their choices. I said it firmly, watching to see if it landed. Maybe, but I enabled those choices, and now I have to live with that. Her voice cracked slightly at the end, and she pressed her lips together until it passed. We sat in silence for a few minutes, the bar's noise washing over us. A couple nearby laughed over something trivial, glasses clinking, life continuing with indifferent ease. Allie traced a finger along the stem of her glass, lost in thought. Finally, Allie spoke again. There's something else you should know. Mira's been talking to a lawyer. She thinks she can claim emotional distress, say you've been stalking and harassing her. Let her try. I've got documentation for everything I've done. The idea didn't faze me. If anything, it confirmed what I already suspected. She's also been calling Derek's other affairs, trying to get them to stay quiet, offering them money to not talk to investigators. That got my attention. Mira's trying to obstruct the investigation. She's desperate. Her career is over, her reputation is destroyed, and Derek has completely cut her off. She's grasping at straws. Allie looked tired in a way sleep wouldn't fix. Will you testify to that if it comes to it? Allie nodded slowly, decisively. Yes, I'm done covering for her lies. As I drove back to Casey's apartment that night, the city lights blurred past the windshield, reflections stretching across the glass. I realized the game had changed again. Derek was threatening to escalate the conflict, and Mira was trying to manipulate the investigation. But I also had new allies, Jolene, Linda, and now Allie, people who were tired of Derek's pattern of behavior and Mira's web of lies. My phone buzzed with a text from Casey. "Check the news. Channel 7 just ran a story about corruption at Derek's company. Your boy is famous." I pulled over and looked up the news story on my phone. There it was, a full investigation into Derek Halsey and his company's financial practices, complete with interviews from former employees and a statement from Jolene's attorney. Derek had wanted to play hardball. Now he was about to learn that sometimes the ball bounces back harder than you threw it. The war was far from over, but for the first time, I felt like I was winning. The annual Founders' Day festival in our town square was supposed to be a celebration of community spirit and local pride. Instead, it became the stage for the final act of Derek Halsey's downfall. I hadn't planned it that way, but sometimes fate has a sense of dramatic timing that would make Shakespeare proud. Casey and I were walking through the festival, past booths selling funnel cakes and local crafts, when I spotted Derek near the main stage. He was talking animatedly on his phone, gesturing with the kind of aggressive body language that suggested his conversation wasn't going well. "Look who decided to show his face in public," Casey said. Derek ended his call and noticed us watching him. Instead of walking away, he approached with the reckless confidence of a man who had nothing left to lose. "Mason Reddan," Derek said loudly enough for nearby festival goers to hear. "Just the man I wanted to see." "Derek, I'm surprised you are here. Thought you might be busy with lawyers." "Oh, I've been very busy. Busy discovering just how far you've gone to destroy my life." Derek's voice carried across the square, drawing attention from curious onlookers. "Did you really think I wouldn't fight back?" "I think you've already lost, Derek. You just haven't accepted it yet?" "Lost?" Derek laughed, but it sounded forced. "Mason, you have no idea what you're dealing with. I've hired private investigators, forensic accountants, the best lawyers money can buy. By the time I'm done, everyone will know that you're nothing but a vindictive ex-husband who couldn't handle losing his wife to a better man." The crowd around us was growing, drawn by the raised voices and obvious tension. I recognized faces from around town, people who knew both Derek and me, people who had been following the scandal through the local gossip network. "Is that what you think happened?" I asked. "That Mira left me for you?" "I know that's what happened. She chose me, Mason. She chose success over mediocrity, ambition over settling." "Really? Then why won't you return her calls?" Derek's confident expression flickered. "What?" "Mira's been trying to reach you for weeks, calling, texting, showing up at your office. But you won't talk to her, will you? Because she was never anything more than a conquest to you." "You don't know what you're talking about." Casey stepped forward. "Actually, we do. See, Derek, the thing about small towns is that everyone knows everyone else's business, and your business has been very entertaining." I pulled out my phone and opened the voice recording app. "Derek, why don't you tell everyone here about your pattern with female employees? Start with Jennifer Walsh from accounting, 2 years ago." Derek's face went pale. "How do you—" "Jennifer's been talking to Jolene's attorney. So has Rebecca Martinez from marketing, and Sarah Chen from the legal department. Turns out when one woman finds the courage to speak up, others follow." The crowd was listening intently now. I recognized Mrs. Patterson, the librarian whose daughter had worked for Derek's company. Her expression was one of grim satisfaction. "You want to destroy my reputation?" Derek's voice was getting shrill. "Fine. But I'm taking you down with me. I've got evidence that you've been stalking Mira, threatening her, harassing her at work." "What evidence?" Derek pulled out his phone. "Recordings, photos, documentation of every threat you've made." "Play them," I said. "What?" "Play the recordings, right here, right now. Let everyone hear these threats I supposedly made." Derek fumbled with his phone, clearly not expecting to be called out so directly. "I don't have to prove anything to you." "No, but you should probably prove it to them." I gestured to the crowd. "Because everyone here knows me. They know I'm not the type to make threats or stalk anyone, but they're starting to figure out exactly what type of person you are." That's when Linda Morrison stepped out of the crowd, carrying her phone. "Derek, honey, you might want to hear this before you keep talking." She pressed play on her phone, and Derek's voice filled the square. "The thing about these small-town girls is that they're so easy to impress. A nice dinner, some expensive wine, and they'll do anything you want. That HR girl, Mira, she was practically begging for it." The recording continued with Derek bragging to his golf buddies about his conquest, describing intimate details about his affair with Mira and laughing about how easy it had been to manipulate her. The crowd's reaction was immediate and visceral, murmurs of disgust, shaking heads, and hostile stares all focused on Derek. His face went from pale to bright red as he realized what had just happened. Where did you get that? Derek demanded. Jake Morrison, my nephew, Linda said. He works maintenance at your country club. Amazing what people will say when they think nobody's listening. Derek looked around at the hostile faces surrounding him and seemed to realize that his public relations war was lost. This is harassment. I'm calling the police. Good idea, said a new voice from the crowd. We all turned to see Jolene Halsey approaching, flanked by two men in expensive suits who were obviously lawyers. She looked elegant and composed, every inch the wronged wife seeking justice. Hello, Derek, Jolene said calmly. I've been looking for you. Jolene, I can explain. No need. I've heard quite enough. She nodded to one of her lawyers, who stepped forward with a folder. Derek Halsey, you're being served with divorce papers, a restraining order, and a civil lawsuit for fraud and embezzlement. The district attorney's office will be filing criminal charges next week. Derek took the papers with shaking hands. You can't do this. Half of everything is mine. Actually, Derek, when you use marital assets to fund your affairs and embezzle from your company to pay for gifts for your mistresses, you forfeit your claim to those assets. Jolene's voice was ice cold. My forensic accountants have been very thorough. The crowd was watching this drama unfold like it was better than any television show. Derek looked around desperately, searching for a friendly face or an escape route, but found neither. This is all your fault, Derek said, pointing at me. You started this vendetta because you couldn't handle losing your wife. Derek, I said quietly, I didn't lose my wife. You stole her. But here's the thing about stolen goods. They never really belonged to the thief. What's that supposed to mean? It means Mira was never yours. She was just another conquest, another trophy for your collection. And now that the game is over, you've thrown her away like everything else you've used up? Derek's composure finally cracked completely. You want to know the truth? Fine. Your wife was boring, needy, clingy. She kept talking about leaving you and starting a new life together, and as if I would ever tie myself down to some small-town nobody who thinks a dinner at Romano's is the height of sophistication. The cruelty in his voice was breathtaking. Even the people in the crowd who didn't know Mira personally looked shocked by his casual dismissal of a woman who had sacrificed her marriage for him. And there it is, I said. The real Derek Halsey, everyone. This is the man who convinced my wife to throw away 7 years of marriage. This is the man who promised her a future while planning to discard her the moment she became inconvenient. Derek seemed to realize he'd said too much. I'm done here. This whole town can go to... Actually, you're not done. The voice came from behind me, and I turned to see Mira walking through the crowd. She looked terrible. Dark circles under her eyes, clothes that hung loose on her frame, hair that needed professional attention, but her expression was one of cold fury that I'd never seen before. Hello, Derek, Mira said. I heard you've been talking about me. Derek backed away from her. Mira, this isn't the time or place? No, I think this is exactly the time and place. Mira's voice carried clearly across the square. Everyone should know what kind of man Derek Halsey really is. She pulled out her own phone. Derek, do you remember the conversation we had last Tuesday, when I asked you to stand by me during the investigation? Mira, don't... She pressed play. Derek's voice filled the square again. Are you insane? I'm not destroying my career for some fling with a married woman. You knew what this was from the beginning. Don't pretend it was anything more. Mira's voice on the recording was pleading. But you said you loved me. You said we had a future together. Derek's recorded laughter was harsh and dismissive. I said what you needed to hear. That's how this works, Mira. Grow up. The crowd's reaction to this recording was even stronger than their response to Linda's. Several women were shaking their heads in disgust, and I heard one man mutter something about Derek being a piece of garbage. Mira looked directly at Derek. 7 years of marriage, Derek. I threw away 7 years of marriage because I believed your lies. You made your choice. Yes, I did, and it was the worst mistake of my life. Mira turned to face me. Mason, I know I don't deserve forgiveness. I know I destroyed everything we had, but I want everyone here to know that you were right about Derek from the beginning. Derek was looking around frantically now, clearly searching for an escape route. The crowd had formed a loose circle around us, and their expressions ranged from hostile to disgusted. I'm leaving, Derek announced. This whole town is beneath me anyway. Actually, said one of Jolene's lawyers, you're not going anywhere. The restraining order prohibits you from leaving the county until the criminal investigation is complete. Derek's BMW was parked at the edge of the square, and he pushed through the crowd toward it. But when he reached his car, he stopped short. Someone had written cheater across his windshield again, but this time they'd used something more permanent than soap. Casey grinned beside me. Wasn't me this time, Looks like Derek's made some new enemies. Derek got into his car and drove away, but not before every person in that square had gotten a clear look at his public humiliation. The crowd began to disperse, buzzing with conversation about what they'd just witnessed. Mira approached me hesitantly. "Mason, I know this doesn't change anything between us, but I wanted you to know that I'm sorry. For everything." "I know you are, Mira, but sorry doesn't fix what's broken." "I know." She looked around at the festival, at the normal people living their normal lives. I threw away something real for a fantasy, and now I have to live with that. She walked away without another word, leaving me standing in the town square with Casey and the lingering smell of funnel cakes and regret. "So," Casey said after a few minutes, "I guess that's it?" "Yeah, that's it. How do you feel?" I thought about it for a moment, watching the festival continue around us as if nothing had happened. Like I can finally breathe again. Derek Halsey's career was over. His marriage was destroyed, and his reputation was in ruins. Mira had lost her job, her marriage, and her self-respect. The Smirk that had started this whole war was nowhere to be found. Justice, it turned out, tasted like victory and felt like closure. Some battles are worth fighting, especially when you're fighting for your dignity. As Casey and I walked away from the town square, my phone buzzed with a text from Jim Crawford. "Divorce papers signed, house is yours. Congratulations." I deleted the message and put my phone away. The war was over, and I had won. But more importantly, I had learned something about myself. Sometimes the quiet guy in work boots is exactly the person you don't want to underestimate. The Smirk was gone, and so was Derek Halsey. Some endings are exactly what they should be.